Hi, this is Bernie Gracie, co-founder of AncestralHunt.com, presenting Breaking Down Brick Walls with Location-Based Genealogy. This tutorial will provide you the strong theoretical framework to understand how to use the power of location and geography to identify new spatial patterns of relatedness, and to also understand the first law of geography and how it can be applied to break down brick walls. The objectives? We're going to introduce you to this unique research technique and strategies. The way we're going to do this is do a very sweeping journey with many teachable moments. I'm going to present you some case studies. I'm going to leave you with a little mystery in my own family research, and hopefully what I'll be able to do is to inspire you to do your own field research. Get away from your PCs, jump in the car, jump in the airplane, and go out and look for the truth. I like to call this the genealogist's prayer. We dance around a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows. I think whether we're a beginning genealogist or we're very experienced and we've hit that brick wall, we all begin to dance around a ring using a whole bunch of tools and search techniques, using traditional surname-based techniques and data searches and Google searches, but yet we get stuck. That secret is sitting out there, trying to be found. And yet these traditional techniques aren't working. Let me tell you a story about what I learned in my own field research. Well, I can't say this is me. If you recognize these guys, it's Agent Mulder and Agent Scully from the X-Files, who are always out seeking to break down their own brick walls, if you remember that show. I like this shot because it reminds me of me 10 years ago, just beginning the genealogical quest, signing on to Ancestry.com and then Genealogy.com and to certain boards, onto Roots Web, and I was able to build out my family tree. But pretty soon, I got stuck. And it was very clear that I would have to use the tagline of the show as an inspiration for my own research. And if you remember that tagline, it was, "The truth is out there." I knew what I needed to do within my own research was to get out from behind my laptop and move out into the field where the family lived. That I needed to be able to conduct research in the old town hall vaults, in the libraries, and in cemeteries to be able to find the truth. And so that's where I headed. One of the locations was in the Morris Cemetery. And looking at old obituaries, it became very clear that's where I was going to be able to need to find family. This is one of the first places that I began to see the spatial orientation of stones, even if with people of a different surname, was a key pattern to understand relatedness. So within a particular plot, you would see the name Emmons and the name Smith and the name Lane within a clearly demarcated plot. But there were no indications of mother, father, son, grandmother, granddaughter, etc. These were clearly people who were somehow related because of their spatial proximity to each other. Moreover, the pattern of surname within this cemetery, by walking through the stones, is that they were very clear that there were a network of families all interoperating within this area, in this case Morris, Connecticut, for quite some time. It was very clear through this cemetery, through the spatial relatedness beyond the plot, that these people were also somehow related. But there was no way for me to capture that. All I had was a notebook in which I was able to capture information, and then what I needed to do was to do research using other tools to be able to see if I could find out what those patterns were. Luckily, I had access to the Town Hall Records Vault in Morris, and through that process, I was able to identify key relationships with the people that I have starred here. But it was only when I went into the Town Hall Record Vault were I able to identify who these people were and their patterns of relationship between these Lanes and Emmons and Smiths and Chrismans. In that process, the town hall clerk made me aware of a kind gentleman, the former Walter France. And what Walter France did for me, as far as a genealogist, changed my life. Let me tell you a story. The town hall clerk provided me his number, and this kind gentleman and his wife invited me over to his home. And I told him that I was a descendant of the emigrant William Emmons, and I understood that he might know something about my family. And he said, "Oh, I know lots of things about your family," and went behind a curtain and began to make copies on an old copier machine. What he presented to me though, blew my mind. And as I said, changed at least my view of genealogy forever. Because what he had done is that he had analyzed the records within the town of Morris. And he basically, upon every land transfer, redrew the map of the town every single day. And what he had done as a gift, while he was focusing in on my family and providing me copies of the ownership and the transfer of land within the family, he had also created a great awareness that was never captured in any vital record in the town. It was really the spatial distribution of the neighbors. And what became so important about that is that spatial distribution of neighbors also clearly indicated and predicted marital patterns. Because I began to see the surnames of the families that I saw in the vital records represented within the maps that Walter provided. And there was a clear indication of proximity was a key predictor of marriage. That the closer people were to each other, the more likely the families interacted, and the more likely that they became related. Moreover, the maps also began to identify the regional economics, how people interacted with each other, and how wealth was transferred within families, and clearly began to see who was in and who was out. What Walter had done was really provide me the deepest insight into how my ancestors were mediating their relationships within the town of Morris. This was a key focus for me, as I was looking for my ancestor, Orange Emmons, who basically disappeared from the record in 1810. So my focus was trying to find Orange. One of the things that became clear through the cemetery research and through what the late Walter France had provided me is how to connect the whats to the whys. One of the things that's important, if you see here is a series of quotes, that when you research into the history of a property, you're plunging into the genealogies that swirl around a place. By tracing the chain of titles to properties, the genealogical relationships within that region become apparent, and when conducted on a large scale in a discrete area, the work reveals the interrelationships between many families as they mediate their relationship to an economy. These quotes by William Hunter in Geography and Genealogy, Locating Personal Pasts, really became quite real for me as I began to use Walter's work to clearly get an understanding of how the Emmons interfaced with the people that lived around them. I think what's important is that the research in the cemetery and the work that Walter had done really began to highlight a set of spatial patterns. In this case, I look at traditional research methods is where most of us, as we begin, we interview our family members, we capture family Bibles, we look at old newspaper clippings, we do the cemetery research, we do vital record searches in town halls, then we start using Google and Ancestry.com and all these great services that are out there to be able to build our pedigree-based approach. And when we get stuck, we begin to look for our ancestors through collateral line research, especially when great-grandma may be living with an uncle as she's moving on. When that line gets stuck, some of us will use DNA-based approaches to hopefully be able to make a connection through Y-DNA or the very exciting improvements with autosomal-based approaches. Many people doing their research also kind of go beyond just the biological-based relationships, but really want to get a sense of the economic-based capabilities or assets that their ancestors had. Looking at education, land, census records, probate records, even criminal records, really get a sense of where your family, where they were poised in society, and what was that transfer of wealth like. Others basically have begun, because they're so attuned to Facebook, have begun really trying to understand what those social nets were also a key indicator of probable patterns of relatedness, is that the social networks, whether it be through church membership or all the societies that existed, that they may indicate patterns of interrelation, which could clearly indicate patterns of familial relationships. This was really to get a deep sense of who your ancestors were, what was their wealth, and who did they interact with. But these research methods are really just echoes of spatial-based patterns as people mediated their lives in a place and time. One of the things that Walter did for me as we exhausted my research there, he said, the truth for your family lies in Ellsworth, Connecticut. This tiny little village. And this is actually a Google Earth shot as I traveled up Route 7 into the mountains of Ellsworth. And this, again, was a key for me in understanding the power of using location. Walter sent me here and saying, this is where you need to further on your research. And using the resources with the town of Sharon and the great resources available at the Sharon Historical Society, I was able to break down many brick walls, but also, once again, understanding the power of location. In looking for orange, I began to see additional patterns emerge of these location-based echoes. One, as we'll now describe, is the pattern of physical geography, the influence of the nature and the land and the topography on its impact on the interaction of people and vice versa. After this brief talk, I'm going to talk about the impact of human geography, the patterns and processes that shapes people's interaction with a particular focus on why, the causes and consequences of the spatial distribution of people within a given locale. And I'll talk about this through the Italian side of my family. The other thing, too, is to understand transportation technology and the ability to overcome physical geography and distance. As we go back further and further in time, when transportation technology was really limited to a horse or your feet, the pattern and the impact of distance and physical geography really became paramount and something you need to keep in mind as you conduct your research. So let's take a look here when we talk about location-based genealogy, that each of these pieces of records, the vital records, the economic-based records, the social-based records, as you move back in time, these are really just echoes of the interaction of people in the context of physical geography with limits or opportunities placed by the technology in their ability to move. And when you begin to understand what these spatial-based patterns are, then they will indicate where you should be looking for the information. When you understand the patterns, they will indicate which sources of information are the ones that are going to be most relevant for you to help break down brick walls. This technique has worked wonders for my own research, not only here in New England, but also in southern Italy.